Hello and welcome to our monthly broker webinar. This month we will be discussing really a very timely subject, transitioning a group from a PEO. Learning and engaging with this transition process provides you with some really great opportunity to win new business, and it also provides you with stronger consultation expertise. And we see successful forward-thinking agencies using this. My name is Lisa Collins. I am the Director of Broker Concierge Services here at PrimePay, and I'm happy you're able to join us today. As always, everybody is on mute. We do want to take your questions, certainly, so if you have any questions, put them in the question area, and after the presentation, we'll make sure that we get back to you and answer any questions that you may have. So today's agenda, what we're going to talk about is why employers choose PEOs in the first place, and then maybe reasons why that they choose to leave PEOs. We'll talk about the employer transition. There's a lot of steps there to review. And then we'll also take a look at what the employee transition looks like and how to set those expectations with the employees. And then we'll finish up with the timeline and also a very useful, helpful checklist. So let's first talk about why a PEO, why companies start engaging with a PEO. First and foremost, it started really with insurance, securing workers' comp insurance, making it affordable, unemployment, and then it moved more into the big company benefits. So smaller companies were looking for a way to really provide their employees with what they perceived as big company benefits, maybe more options, less expensive, more flexibility. And then as time has gone on, it's certainly compliance has gotten really, really difficult, especially with smaller employers. There's just so much to deal with. Then usually a smaller company doesn't have anybody in particular that specializes in HR, so they're looking to outsource that and really have an HR director outsourced. Administrative back office support is really helpful for a smaller company because they're stretched. So really, the bottom line is they tend to go to PEO for the benefits and really get back to running their business. Why PEOs leave, or why companies leave PEOs. I'm sorry, that jumped on me. A lot of times it just becomes too expensive. So with a lot of PEOs will charge a percentage of payroll. So as the company grows, so does the payroll, and it can get quite expensive. Or they may find that they're not utilizing all the services that the PEO offers. They can't customize and just pay for those services that they need. The benefit program may not fit their employee needs based on their demographics. PEOs have something called co-employment, and what co-employment means basically is the employee is owned by both the PEO and the employer, but the employer is still liable for the employee. So it doesn't really necessarily mitigate their risks like maybe they think about when they enter the PEO. And sometimes something to consider is a smaller company may now have to adhere to big company regulations, and that may be challenging for them. The agencies that we work with that are most successful in growing their book of business are really holding a total business process conversation with their prospects and their clients, where maybe in the beginning we saw the employee benefit broker role as really handling benefit consultation. Today, your role has really evolved into so much more. You're adding cost-saving conversations into that conversation. Pre-tax accounts, for example, not only the FSA, HSA, and HRAs, but getting creative and stacking the plans together. Moving to more requests on compliance services, which ACA certainly brought to the forefront. Maybe in the past, you were really only talking about COBRA. Then with ACA, that conversation changed. And ACA also, what we've seen is brought more of a focus on ERISA as it relates to health and welfare plans. So to manage these requests with direct-to-employer solutions such as benefits, gusters, and name leaves, companies were looking for what they had to offer. and we certainly have seen a gain in popularity with the PEOs. These companies, the Gustos, the Zenefits, Namely's, and all the PEOs, they are real competition for you, which means you need to be able to consult on all of these solutions that we're talking about today. PEOs are becoming more prevalent because running a business is becoming much more complex. So if you have alternatives, not just the Ben admin alternatives, but if it includes HR assistance, onboarding, applicant tracking, brokers are also seeing a real need now to add not only HR services, but payroll as well, because that provides access to the most accurate data. By integrating best-in-class solutions, you provide a complete ecosystem to help your client create the efficiencies they're looking for, controlling their costs, reducing errors, and really significantly mitigating compliance risk by this data being shared amongst all these systems. So let's take a closer look at what's required to transition a company out of the PEO. There are many steps to this, and a lot of the steps are working simultaneously. And you really need, if you're helping an employer with this, you need to provide close oversight of the process to ensure really nothing falls through the cracks. Before you do anything, read the contract. Stop, take a real close look at that contract to understand the terms, the conditions, the penalties. You will see penalties, and other types of what I call gotcha clauses that you really want to avoid any kind of surprises for your client. Typically, a termination requirements will look like 30 to 60-day term notice, but I've also seen PEOs have an initial term requirement of like 12 months. So you want to take a look at that too. We'll talk about some penalties, like as it relates to 401ks that we've seen, and also maybe some hidden costs like administering COBRA. Before you begin anything too, after you look at the contract, you want to get your partners in place. So begin to work with putting systems in place, building out platforms, getting the consultants all in order before you give any term notice. Everything should be ready to go before you provide a written notice of termination to that PEO. So as the benefit broker, if you're not doing P&C as well, you want to reach out to a partner you may have in the P&C area. The PEO was the payroll provider. That's their hub. That's their core of all the data. So you're going to have to help secure a payroll company. You're going to most likely need to find a COBRA administrator because PEOs handle the COBRA administration. And if the company had any pre-tax arrangements, FSAs, HRAs, or HSAs, you're going to need that outsourced as well. And then, of course, we'll look at towards the end some benefit technology. So a Ben admin portal, especially many of the PEOs, the larger ones, have a very efficient technology system in place. So let's start with payroll, because payroll really is, like I said, the hub of a PEO, because they know that's where all the data starts. That's where it's controlled. It's important to review whether or not the PEO is certified. And this really could determine when you terminate the contract. Do you terminate it 1/1, or can you terminate it throughout the year? Because there will be different tax implications, which I'll talk about here in a minute. Just as a general overview, a certified PEO, to become certified, they have to go through an IRS. It's a pretty rigorous process. So they must prove things like their tax compliance. They have to provide extensive information on their financials. They even have to have some background information like criminal background checks. So this certification, what it does is it guarantees that the business is not subject to what we call double IRS taxation, which I'll describe here in a minute as well. And also, the certification shifts the liability for unpaid payroll taxes to the PEO, not the business. And this is a really important point. A lot of people don't know that without the certification, if a PEO doesn't pay taxes, the business is liable. So working with a certified PEO also means that you do not lose tax credit or have to pay double taxes if you join a PEO after January 1st. So as you're aware, with Social Security and Medicare programs, there's limits to the amount of earnings subject to taxation in a particular given year. So for 2019, it's 132,900. The employer is paying 6.2%, or about $8,240, and they also have a Medicare of 1.45%. So these taxes, the employer under a PEO is paying this. When the company leaves the PEO, they are also paying taxes under their new federal ID number, and the tax wage base restarts unless that PEO is certified. So if it's certified, that wage base does not restart. So you can see where that's important. If it's not certified, you may want to wait until 1/1, where it would restart anyways. If they are certified, then there's no reason to wait. We have provided here, and everybody will get this presentation at the end, a link to determine and find out what PEOs are certified. I took a look at it, and there's only about 60 PEOs certified, so you want to really take a look at that before you move forward. Data collection also will be very important. So accessing reports from the PEO outlining company gross to net for taxes, deductions, and earnings. And what I would do is I would take their reports and try not to ask the PEO, at least in the beginning, because when you start asking for this information, like compensation information and the gross to net for taxes, they will have a pretty good indication of what you're doing. And I have heard stories that the PEOs tend to be not so cooperative if they perceive this. Not all of them, but I've heard that happen, or they may be very slow to provide the data. So try to access the reports for this information before you request certain things that you absolutely must go to them for, which if you take a look at this last bullet point, copies of court orders, wage garnishments, and tax levies that they're needing to handle through payroll, and you will have to as well. Companies that didn't originally start with a PEO, they may already have tax accounts, but if they didn't, they will have to obtain federal and state tax ID numbers. They'll have to obtain state unemployment tax ID numbers. And also you'll need to take a look at if the state is a PEO SUTA state or if it's an employer state. If it's a PEO SUTA state, SUTA will restart as well. They'll have to obtain federal unemployment tax ID and a tax deposit account. They'll need to establish that federal employee ID number if they didn't already have one in place. And if there's any local tax withholdings, they'll have to handle that as well. So payrolls to do, and a lot of times payroll companies get involved and help with this. Loading year-to-date tax and deductions. Establish imputed income codes and rules for term life, disability, and domestic partner. So you think about disability. If you impute the premium, the disability is not a taxed benefit. Term life, $50,000 or more. You also want to set up the court order deductions. You'll establish your own deduction codes or work with them in the deduction codes, at least for the benefits. Set up reoccurring pay codes, the payroll processing schedule. That have to determine a company structure as well, divisions, departments, and so forth. And they'll also be setting up a general ledger. So one best practice that we have really encouraged people to do is consider running a parallel payroll for at least the first one before terminating that PEO, because you certainly don't want anything wrong to go with the payroll transition. Then you'll also need to help them understand pay policies or consider pay policies. So you want to look at what the PEO's leave policy was and how it might affect the employees when they're terminated. You'll want to communicate to the employees any changes with the new policies. The company will have to develop non-exempt policies. They'll need to determine what their leave accrual policy will be, or maybe not any leave accrual policy. We have some forward-thinking companies even doing that. If there's hourly employees, you're going to need a time clock system. You'll need to train the employees on that time and attendance system as well. And balances will need to be loaded into the system. And you really want somebody also to verify the accuracy of those accrual formulas that you put into that time and attendance system. So now that we're done with the payroll, let's take a look at some benefits and insurance plans. Companies, for the first time, have the flexibility to design the program with you as their consultant. And usually that is a real positive for them. The first thing that they should do, though, is establish a workers' comp plan. You cannot have any lapse of coverage with that. It is required. You're going to also instruct them to load class codes and rates into the payroll system, and also identifying officers that will be exempt. When you're looking at the health, the dental, the vision, any of those kind of plans that actually had deductibles, you want to take a look at the PEO's deductibles and maybe new plans that you're introducing. You may want to look at the deductibles that have already been incurred. If it's towards the end of the year, is it a higher amount? Um, will the new carrier, will they give a deductible credit? Conversation to have with the carrier. But whatever the case may be, you want to communicate to the employees, if you don't have that deductible credit, that their deductible will restart because these are new benefits. You're going to help them define the contribution structure. So what the employer is paying, what the employee is paying, maybe by job class too, all those different variances. And your experience can share with them best practices for that. Eligibility, who's eligible, who's not eligible. And you'll also want to take a look at the state disability requirements. Some states run their own disability programs, and it is not private. If they have any pre-tax accounts, an FSA, an HRA, for example, you're going to have to get a new administrator. I would get their plan document and their SPD to understand how the current plan is being run and try to mirror it as much as possible. So you select a new administrator, but the next question will be, will the PEO continue to administer the runout claims? So are they going to handle those claims, or are you going to have the new administrator handle the claims? If the PEO is administering the run-out claims, I'm sure there'll be a charge for that, and a lot of times there's an upcharge or an additional premium to that. So you'll want to know what that cost is. Have a conversation with the new administrator. Will they actually process the run-out claims? A lot do. If they do decide to take that on, maybe it saves them some costs, but there will be a little bit more work. You'll have to get a balance report, and there will also be this blackout period that they have to flush the claims through the PEO administration. Usually it's a week to 2 weeks, and then after that period, the new administrator will load the balances and pick up. Both FSAs and HRAs are subject to COBRA. Very important to note. So if there's any FSA balance in the account when the termination with the PEO occurs, it's essentially a termination of employment. So that COBRA notification from the PEO must have the FSA included. What I would do, best practice again, is if you know you're terminating a certain date with the PEO, communicate it as soon as possible in advance to the employees that have FSAs, because that will allow them or help them to spend down their balance, and hopefully they don't have a COBRA situation. For an HRA, it is a COBRA eligible event if they did have that plan in place, and that should also be included in those COBRA notices. The 401k, we usually do see termination fees in the 401k. Can be quite costly too. We have been successful in reducing some of those fees, so really work with somebody who knows what they're doing, and hopefully you can get some of those, if not waived, maybe even reduced. The employees will experience a blackout period. No contributions can be made during this period, so you'll want to define that period with the new administrator and communicate that time frame to the employees. Make sure they understand what that means. Select a new administrator, certainly. You're going to have to identify or help them identify who in their company who should be the fiduciary, and also potentially help them with some fund selections if you're licensed to do so. So compliance becomes a big one. COBRA is something to really pay close attention to. Employment with the PEO is ending, meaning COBRA notices must be sent out. The PEO, what we have seen many times is they charge really large fees to manage COBRA. So you want to refer to their contract and make sure that your client understands what those fees are. Have benefits in place before the termination so there's no lapse in coverage, and hopefully you won't have these large COBRA administrative fees. You want to also discuss with the new carrier who the COBRA participants are, how many of them are there. When that occurs, you have to be very transparent with the carrier. Select a new COBRA administrator, important. A lot of companies don't expect to do that in-house, especially when the PEO is handling it. As employees enroll, even though it's not technically new employment, they are new employees of your new Federal Employee Identification Number, FEIN, right? And they're also enrolling in new benefits. So initial rights notices under the COBRA law need to go out. And you'll also want to notify the current COBRA participants that you have a new COBRA administrator in place. A lot of times that new administrator will handle that process for you. If you are working with a client that's an applicable large employer, you want to help them select an ACA solution for tracking and reporting. I would encourage you to look for a solution that integrates with payroll because it reduces the amount of administrative work, uploading of data or double keying data and so forth. You will have, or they will have to load year-to-date hours worked into a new ACA system if in fact they change the system. A lot of times that ACA system is the PEO system, so it will probably be a change. Also, it will be prudent to run the numbers to ensure affordability and that you're hitting that participation requirement under the new plans that are established. For ERISA, prepare new plan documents. You no longer can use their SPDs or their plan documents. Best practice, again, I encourage you to use an ERISA wrap document. So you have several ERISA plans. That wrap document gives you one ERISA plan number. You'll need to distribute new SPDs to all the employees under the required ERISA timeframe and include all the health notices as well. If it is a larger company that has 100 or more people participating on the plan at the beginning of the year, they're going to need to complete the Form 5500. You can find companies to outsource that too, and they'll also need to do the summary annual report. Moving on from payroll and benefits, now into HR policies and administration. You want to gather, again, as much data up front before the PEO gets the termination. So get that census. Hopefully they provide you with reports. You'll also want to get previous performance evaluations. If you have anybody on plan or anybody having performance issues who've been written up, you want to have that documentation. So if there's a termination or a suit that's brought, you'll have that documentation to help you with that process. And termination records as well, you want to keep those or have those handy. So if you've got unemployment claims that come up after the termination, you'll have all the data and records necessary to fight that as well. So think about all the HR policies that they need to put in place. They need to develop policies and procedures. They've got to create a new employee handbook. Highly encourage you to have legal counsel review that handbook, and you will have to have all employees sign that handbook. Plan documents need to be prepared and reviewed. So again, you can outsource that, SPDs, plan documents, health notices, exchange notices, COBRA notices, it goes on and on. The carriers will provide the SBCs. One thing to note, we're finding sometimes carriers do not provide the SBC if they're doing the HRA administration, so you want to double check that. They'll need to determine what rules and regulations must be followed based on their company size. So how do they count their company size? Are they 20 or more employees? Are they 50 or more employees? So help them through identifying their size and then what rules and regulations they need to follow. Establishing a compliant leave policy. A lot of states today, there's been a lot of changes recently, so you want to check with state laws also on leave policies. Do you need to have an affirmative action plan in place? Do you have a compliant HIPAA policy? So a lot of HR bullet points as well. Then processes. So define rules and responsibilities. Who's going to handle the onboarding, the payroll, the benefit administration, the HR? You're going to have the company identify their structure, their departments, their division, their classes. You'll get involved in that just because of benefit eligibility. I have a lot of brokers today really helping with a lot of business solutions outside of benefits. And one of those is the recruiting process. That is usually one of the number one um, challenges a company has. So helping them identify an effective recruiting process, there's a lot of nice online systems as well, is important. Defining workflow, onboarding new hires. The PEO probably was handling all that. So get an online system that allows the employee to self-serve themselves before even the first day of employment. They're completing their tax forms, their I-9s, signing the employee handbook, whatever that new onboarding process looks like. Determine training needs. Training needs are becoming more important. We see a lot of states requiring certain training, such as sexual harassment is a big one right now. There may be OSHA training involved. So understand the training needs and then identify. There's a lot of online training platforms out there that are easy to use and cost effective. Establishing the workflow for the employees changes and terminations as well. So not only the onboarding, but how you're going to process somebody out. Looking at the technology solution, again, if you think about it, the PEO was handling really everything, the payroll, the benefit administration, the compliance. So having a system, a platform in place that integrates payroll, HR, benefit administration will make it more seamless. It will have the same feel as that efficiency that they had before. Certainly saves costs, reduces redundancies, errors, and also mitigates any compliance risks. So take a look at what they were used to having administered for them, what they had online, and then identify systems to replace that. Do you need applicant tracking? Do you need onboarding? Do you need a performance management system? How about a time and labor management? Do you have people that are clocking in and clocking out, hourly employees? If you're establishing a flexible benefit program and a robust benefit program, you may have voluntary and worksite benefits. That can be challenging to administer for the company. So look to a Ben admin platform to help with that. If they're an applicable large employer and have to follow ACA, you want to make sure that you have a system in place for that too, that's seamless and integrates with payroll. You think about the COBRA administration. If you integrate it with a Ben admin platform, there's no need for the company to go into a separate COBRA system and enter new hires or qualifying events to generate the required letters. Integrate it. Take that step away from them. Same with the pre-tax accounts. If they're offering an FSA, an HRA, or an HSA plan, simply by using a Ben admin platform that feeds to a pre-tax plan administrator, those accounts can be set up seamlessly, so they don't need to go into a separate portal for the enrollment. So think of a system for them that everything is in one place for the company, for you, which is great that you have access to all that data, and also for the employee. Let's take a look at what it looks like for the employee transition. Communication is really going to be key here in setting expectations. They will need to complete new hire paperwork. That may confuse them. So just explain to them why they need to do that. It's a new tax ID number, direct deposit forms, tax forms, I-9, signing off on employee handbooks, any policies, procedures. All of that upfront work, like they are a new hire, needs to be completed. They have new benefit offerings, new decisions to make. Describe to them when their current benefits end with the PEO and when the new benefits begin. If there's any gaps, especially sometimes we'll see a gap in maybe the flex administration or disability, describe that. Tell them how that transition is going to look. Set the expectation that they will be getting COBRA notices, but their new COBRA benefits, or their new benefits start on this date, so they may not even need to elect or pay attention to those COBRA notices. So educate them. They will receive or should receive the notices from the PEO. And then the pre-tax accounts we talked about, notifying them as soon as possible so they can spend down their balance and they can also capture the new enrollment information. There's a lot here. You can see there's a lot of steps and a lot of things to think about. So what we have done is we have prepared a checklist, and we provide this checklist. If you're a broker concierge partner with PrimePay, you have access to this checklist in your broker portal. If you're not a partner, it's easy to become a partner. That we want to give you those tools and resources. So check in with us. I'll give you the contact information here at the end. This checklist is actually 4 pages long, so it is not all inclusive because there are variances from time to time, but it's pretty extensive and is a really good work process flow for that. Your timeline, because a lot of things are running congruently, and then the next step is based on something else. It's very difficult to put a timeline in place, but I think it's helpful to understand when each service ends. So, for example, the last payroll run with the PEO, let them know when that's going to be and when the new payroll will start. Their last paycheck from the PEO also may be a live paycheck and not a direct deposit, so you want to be able to communicate that as well. The workers' comp, the unemployment, the employee benefits, the COBRA, the pre-tax accounts, all of that, even the system access, how long you have to access the data within the PEO. Sometimes there is a period of time, 30 days, 60 days after on the portal that you can access data. Understand when each one of these ends so you know when to pick it up under the new employer account. All right, so hopefully you got a lot of information, a lot of thoughts around this and how to proceed. We have had many successful brokers use this kind of conversation to really prospect and also win a lot of new business. If you do want that checklist and you're not a partner, like I said, it's easy to become a partner. Just email us at concierge@primepay.com. Also want to remind you that we have a Broker Concierge channel on YouTube. All of our monthly webinars are recorded here, so you can access that. We've got blogs, and follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. A lot of good free content for you. So with that, we're going to end this monthly webinar. Hope you have a great, successful open enrollment season, and we will talk to you or see you again in November. The next webinar will be on non-discrimination testing and talking about red flags, especially setting up new plans in the new year. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you.